actually became free when he went to the physical prison.
Yeah.
Yes.
Malcolm X. So in a few words.
This movie is about ideologies, changes in ideologies. What about you?
Transformation, intelligence, and courage.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, so this is a movie about this young black man in
America?
what was it, 60s?
So he was born in 1923 or 25, I believe.
Yeah, so he's growing up at a time where there's a lot of racism around, and he doesn't really question things. He just gets on with life. He's got his friends, he's got his party life, and he goes along without questioning anything. That is until he ends up in prison. And that's where the transformation part of his life comes in.
Yes, he goes to prison and he starts to read books. So initially, he's not into books, okay? Somebody approaches him and says, have you heard of Elijah Muhammad? And, this person then takes Malcolm X through this journey of understanding and reading books. And it's just such a beautiful journey because we go through it with him. Malcolm X opens up a dictionary and he looks at two words, black and white. And initially, he doesn't see anything wrong with it until he starts to look closer. So he realizes, for example, that the word white is associated in the dictionary with purity, pureness, innocence, goodness, right?
Yeah, angels,
right? And then he looks at black, and that's when he starts to see things.
Evil and darkness,
bad.
At first, he's thinking, maybe there's no intention behind these definitions. And then as he goes on, he starts realizing that, no, you can't. Come on, there's so many words that not even seem related to white are connected to white. Like, why do angels have to be white? And then he questions who even wrote this dictionary. And then this dictionary, I think, becomes the symbol of his life. He's everything. He starts questioning everything. That whose framework am I living under? And then he even questions religion, like who said Jesus was white? And that's where his transformation starts with Malcolm X. He starts questioning things.
Yes. Can I just say he starts to question why Jesus looks white?
Yeah, but what I mean is because before that he assumed, he took it for granted that Jesus is white.
Yeah.
When you question sometimes your mind is like, but who says that's the case? Maybe the similar person who wrote the dictionary.
Yeah.
Right? So we have this scene of him in prison where he's in a chapel, in a religious group, and the clergy guy, the religious leader, is talking, and then Malcolm questions him about Jesus. He says, "Are you saying that Jesus is white?" We start to see a different side to Malcolm, who at the beginning of the movie and his life is a person who's just like everybody else. He's got these parties, he's thinking about the girls he's dating. Although even at the beginning we see him questioning things. He has it. It's part of him. He meets that girl and then he's questioning her, like, why are you dating me?
He realizes that all his life, up until he is enlightened, that he's been sort of trying to avoid being black. For example, trying to straighten his hair. And there is a scene at the start of the movie that I love now. It's become so iconic for me, where he's walking around with his friend and he's dancing and he looks like a clown because he's got this bright, I think, orangey red suit on. This part is a reflection of what Malcolm says later on in his life, that people, white people in power, well, bear in mind, he's talking about the 60s, 50s and 60s. Yeah. They use black people as puppets for entertainment, just like royalty used to do with their peasants, for example. Yeah. So I've made lots of videos on these in the channel. But I think the movie, the part where he's dancing with his friend at the start of the movie, where he's walking in the street and dancing, he is demonstrating that puppet mentality where they're happy where they are. They think they should live in that neighborhood. You don't really look for anything else. He even shows them in classroom, I think, where his teacher tells him that he shouldn't really aim to be a lawyer or something like that. So it's just keeping people low and keeping people in that slave mentality. And that's when that realization comes in prison, that he has been living a life that hasn't been his. He's been told to live a certain life.
For me, Malcolm X, he showed me that you need to have intelligence and courage together, because he was intelligent too. Because courage on its own is not always necessarily a good thing.
It also shows how Malcolm, when after he realized that he'd been a victim to this, or he'd been vulnerable to this framework where he's got to live a certain life, then he changes and he thinks he's taken control of his life, but he doesn't realize that he's actually fallen into the traps of somebody else of his own race. So I wonder that Elijah Muhammad I'm talking about, because Elijah Muhammad is black. And I think what Malcolm doesn't realize is that he comes out of one ideology and he goes into another one without realizing. And when he realizes, it's too late.
Because when Malcolm was in prison, he feels that he was saved by Elijah Muhammad, because initially that person who comes to him and makes him question himself and then starts his transformation, he was a disciple of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So when Malcolm X is transformed, he feels like he owes a debt to this Elijah Muhammad. Elijah Muhammad claimed to be a prophet for the black people. Malcolm X, he felt, he
liberated.
He felt liberated by him, and then he started following him and following his path, and thinking that maybe he is the guy, the savior for us black people.
Yes, I think what the movie is trying to tell us is that people in power, regardless of their race, they will exploit people who are just vulnerable. And Malcolm X was another vulnerable individual, who was exploited by Elijah Muhammad and Elijah Muhammad's ideologies. What Elijah Muhammad didn't realize is that if you're going to have a spokesperson, if that person is smart, like Malcolm X, the moment he questions your leadership as Elijah Muhammad, he's also going to question your whole beliefs. And that's what happened with Malcolm X. The moment that he saw inconsistencies in Elijah Muhammad, he started to question his beliefs and Elijah Muhammad himself and Elijah Muhammad's beliefs as whole. And that's when, unfortunately, Malcolm X became a target for Elijah Muhammad's group. But it was too late.
That's the intelligent part of Malcolm X. His power was on his questioning mind. He always questioned things, although maybe a bit late, but he did question things, and that's what made him who he was.
So what I loved about the character in the movie, and I think also in real life, was you didn't just see the transformation of his mind, you also saw the transformation in his demeanor, in the way he talks, in the way he dresses, in everything.
I think he promoted education as one of the tools for liberation, but we need to consider that for Malcolm X, education is not what the typical education of top down education from the people in power, because that's already the prison. For him, education was seeking, questioning, exploring for yourself with a critical mind.
That's what he wanted. That's what Malcolm X wanted. He said we need to be thirsty for knowledge, and that's how we gain knowledge.
When Malcolm X was young, before he went to prison, I feel like he was always questioning how he could become more powerful or how he could thrive in society. And he comes across this gangster mafia black guy in a pub. Obviously, Malcolm X is part of his own black community. He hangs around with them. He doesn't really associate with outside. So in his community, he sees this black person who is a head of a...
That's before he goes to prison?
Yeah. He sees this black person who is a head of a organized crime. And he comes across powerful. He's sitting there with his bodyguards and his, all his boys. And he's got a gun and he's got money. And, he feels like maybe this is power. I need to associate with this guy and work with him and become more powerful. Well, when he goes to prison, and he reads books and he becomes educated. He becomes so powerful, Malcolm X, in his own way, that at the end, when he meets that guy, that organized crime head boss, he's so much more powerful than him. Because the movie, or I think we can see from his life, that sometimes we get an illusion of power, not power itself, because true power is in the mind.
And that's what he said. That's what Malcolm X said. Yes.
That true power is the power of the mind, is the power of understanding and seeing beyond illusions and lies. But sitting there with a gun in your hand and people bowing down to you, that's not true power. And I think the actor Denzel Washington, I think he did. I don't think anybody else could have pulled this off. He became Malcolm X. When I think of Malcolm X, I see a picture of Malcolm X or Denzel Washington when he's acting Malcolm X. They're both the same to me now because he did such a good job. It was a great movie. I relate to this movie specifically because of, I went through transformations in my life and I see how this Malcolm X is transformed and I relate to that.
Can I ask you a question?
No.
Okay, so my question is, what part of Malcolm X's character was inspiring to you, or most inspiring to you?
He was always seeking truth. And he was the sort of person who, when he saw holes in a narrative that he previously thought was true, he could never unsee it. He could not lie to himself, because we all know people can lie to themselves for comfort.
Mm-hmm.
It's very easy to lie to yourself and convince yourself because, it's comfortable. He was not one of those. Even if he wanted to, he could not live with a lie. But that's the other side to him, because when he found something to be true, if he truly believed in it, he lived it and he breathed it and he fight for it and he was passionate about it. And this is an authentic person. This is, we see these memes or these sayings on social media, be yourself, and real knows real. And he was real. He was a real. This is what a real person is. It's not a person who just claims to be real.
We all know people who post things on social media.
Oh, kill me now. So what did you find inspiring in Malcolm X?
His push for education and reading books. I love that. Yes, you know what? I actually do believe that reading books, good books, can be just as good, if not better, than education.
I agree.
Itself, right?
Yes.
But anyway, so that maybe education is a tool to reading those great books.
But then that is education when you read them. You're educating yourself.
Yes. What I meant was like school education.
You mean systematic education?
Systematic, yes.
Systemic.
And I will never forget, because can I just say, I had not heard of Malcolm X before you introduced me to this great movie.
Yeah.
And I was hesitant, and I remember I wasn't very keen, as you know me, because I don't like changes when it comes to movie. I just watch the same thing over and over.
Yeah.
And it took you some efforts to convince me to watch it. Yeah. But when I did watch it, I'm so glad I did.
It changed you.
Yeah. It changed me. What I loved about the character, the mind, was the philosophy of his mind. The philosophy that he had, the slave mentality, house slave mentality, which I've talked about in a different video.
Yeah.
And how we can be prisoners of our own mind. He himself went to prison, but he talked about how we can be prisoners of our mind.
He realized that he was always in prison.
He was always in prison before going to prison.
Yeah. Prison actually liberated him.
He actually became free when he went to the physical prison.
Yeah.
Yes. Ooh. All right, and that's it.